How many attorney jokes do you know? Any of them positive about attorneys? No, they're not. Today's guest might challenge your thoughts about attorneys. He speaks of the human business and transparency. Listen in. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Man, fired up for Kyle Ferguson, founder and CEO of FBFK.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
What is FBFK?
FBFK Law, as we like to refer to ourselves now, is a full-service law firm based in Texas, but with offices in Orange County as well, California.
So you wanted to get to the beach so badly that you opened up an office in Orange County?
Exactly. It's a good marketplace there, and we have good metro areas here in Texas covered between the Dallas marketplace, Houston, and San Antonio and Austin. Yeah, I love Southern California, so it was a little bit of a personal project, and we met some great partners there.
It's awesome.
How many people do you have out there?
We have 8 currently,
Okay.
and here in 60 days, we'll be at 15.
Great.
The group that's joining. Yeah.
Good.
It's exciting times.
It is very exciting. Yes, sir.
Let's start with you. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Lawton, Oklahoma, just a little bit north of the border, southwest part of Oklahoma. My family were farmers and ranchers and kind of pioneers to that area. And my dad was a builder and developer in southwest Oklahoma and North Texas. And my mom's family, we still have a large family farm and ranch in that part of the country. Grew up there and had a wonderful childhood. Grew up out in the Wichita Mountains.
Yep.
And decided I had family that lived in Southern California, and I stumbled upon Orange County, California, Newport
That was a little
Beach.
different than Lawton, Oklahoma.
It was very different, and I fell in love with it. And I love Oklahoma. I love my roots, and I love my family there and my people, my fellow Oklahomans. Just like I love my fellow Texans, but I love Southern California. I love the business community there and the people there, and so
you and I have talked before. You know, my wife is from Altus, Oklahoma.
Right.
They're side by side.
Yeah.
Altus is the Air Force, Lawton, the Army.
Fort Sill, yes, sir.
So Scott and his wife Alicia have been on Lake Altus.
Oh,
So way
right.
back when we all did a couples trip, and
I almost died on Lake Altus, I think.
he thought lakes were like blue, but he had not been to an Oklahoma lake where it was red.
Red.
I just
Red,
remember
yes.
it was rough.
Oh, it was just
really rough.
Yeah.
That's all I remember.
yeah. You know, he's a pro surf type guy, so all that he was looking for a little bit more glass.
Yes.
But did you ever spend any time on Lake Altus?
Lake Latonka. I mean,
Is
I
where
know of
y'all
Lake
would go,
Altus,
yeah.
and my parents actually, when they were young, they spent some time on Lake Altus. Yeah, and I can't remember what's the name of the mountains there in that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the name, but that area.
We talked about it. Yeah, I'm drawing.
It's on the other side of the Wichita Mountains.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What are some distinct memories from growing up?
Oh man, I had a very envious childhood, very good childhood. I grew up riding horses. We had chickens. I mean, it was out in the country. I lived in a neighborhood, a subdivision out in the country, and my dad set our house I grew up in off. It was an acre lot, and he set it on one side of the lot, and so I had a football field on the other side that my buddies and I would play on. Four-wheelers and motorcycles, and I had a really good childhood.
That's awesome. Brothers, sisters?
I have a sister 5 years older than me. Yeah. She still lives in Lawton, and she has a couple of boys, and she and her husband, her sons are now have their own families.
Yeah.
So she's a grandmother. Which is
very cool.
Makes me feel old.
So where'd you go to undergrad, and when did you know you wanted to be a lawyer, and how'd all that work out for you?
I went to undergrad at a little school in Costa Mesa, California, now called Vanguard University, formerly Southern California College. When I was there in the early 90s, they had about 1,200 students. Now it's got maybe 2,300 students, and a beautiful place, 10 minutes from the beach, Newport Beach, wonderful community, wonderful culture. And
you mentioned earlier, so how did you get exposed to it, and what was the phone
This
call like when
California
you called your dad and mom?
Been going on a long time.
Oh, that's a funny story. So I went to California. I had cousins that lived there.
Okay.
And my cousins introduced me to the area, and I fell in love. You know, I didn't.
You were like,
I think I
this
knew,
ain't Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's so difficult to fall in love
I'll
with Orange
never
County.
forget calling home and saying, I walked by a banana and it was hanging on a tree growing. Did you know bananas grew on trees? You know, actually seeing one, I mean, it was fascinating. Just everything grows there and it's just so beautiful, and fell in love with the place. And went back to Oklahoma and told my mom and dad, said, I want to go to school in California. And my dad said promptly and very quickly and abruptly, no, don't bring it up again.
So he was very collaborative.
He was very collaborative. My mother was very collaborative. My dear,
tends
sweet
to be-
mother.
yes.
Yes, she convinced him to let me
She said,
spread
I'll go
my
to work
wings.
on your old man.
She did. She did for me, and she let me spread my wings and convinced him to let me go. And I went out there and just fell in love with the place, had a wonderful experience, grew up a lot there, and then decided my senior year of undergrad, maybe I'll think about law school. I don't know. That sounds something interesting. You know, knowing what you want to do when you're a 21-year-old kid when you grow up is really, it's impossible. You don't know enough about life.
So,
your brain
yeah.
hadn't even fully formed, and you got to know what you're going to
Exactly.
do the rest of your life.
So no family member or anything, just maybe law.
family.
Just sounded interesting.
No family. I had I think a family friend at the time mentioned it. Had you ever
Yeah.
considered it? And so the way it came for me, and I was a very young and very poor college student. And I thought, well, I'll take the LSAT, the law school admission exam, and see how I do. And I did okay. And I thought, well, if I want to do this, I want to have some options. So I applied to one of the many review courses, and one of them was offering scholarships because I couldn't afford the $500 for the review course at the time. Again, broke college student. And I wrote a little essay, and they gave me a scholarship for the review course. I thought, well, if I get the scholarship, then I'll take the exam. So I got the scholarship, then I studied and did really well on the exam. I thought, well, if I get into some good law schools and some interesting law schools, and then I'll go and see how much, if I have the money and if I can afford to go. And got into a few law schools. About half of those I applied to, and so it's kind of how it went. I just kind of kept laying out, extending it a little bit. If this happens, then I'll go. If this happens, and it all just kept lining up for me. And so then ended up going to law school at the University of Oklahoma. It was not my top choice. I should admit that to my Sooner friends, but my fellow alums. But my dad was battling cancer at the time. And he passed away a few years later after that decision in 2001. I graduated law school in 1999 with my JD MBA, and I felt like I needed to be close to home. I had all of my stuff in Washington, D.C. I was going to go to law school at George Washington University. I was going to borrow some money to do so, but just something in my instincts, my pit of my stomach said I need to be close to home. And that was a very instrumental inflection point in my life. It was a big deal, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I ended up, again, going to OU, and I applied for a scholarship there to also get my MBA, so I did the joint, and they gave me scholarship money. I got my JD MBA, and was able to spend a lot of time, 4 of the last 6 years of my dad's life that I was able to spend with him. And he was very close to me, mentor. He was a very successful entrepreneur growing up, real estate developer. He'd made a lot of money, and of course in real estate, lost a lot of money in the late 80s. And so I grew up and was very close to him, and he was kind of formed my faith and belief system, and was just very involved in my life. And so it was good. That was very good for me.
Well, it says obviously a lot about your family. Obviously, it says a lot about you, Kyle, but your whole family. I mean, it's your family was you had that instinct to say I need to be close.
Yeah.
So I know there was you shared, and I hope that you'll whatever level you'll want to share some of your dad's journey. How did it shape, and how does it still shape your mindset, because it has had a very significant impact on the way you do business in life.
My view of the world, my view of people, my view of business is all framed by that. That does frame my perspective. My dad was a very strong man of faith, very strong belief system that I grew up in, and he taught my family. I was reared in, and very grateful for that. And he grew up very poor, and he went to college. He played football, and he had been a high school English teacher and football coach. And then one summer, a few years in, he started selling real estate for his older brother's real estate company, and made more money selling real estate a couple of summers in a row, and thought, this is better. So I like making a little bit of money, and he knew found he had a knack for that. And at the time, this would have been in the 1960s, and you could imagine an army town, a military town during the Vietnam War. It was a boom town.
Yep.
Yeah.
So he bought his brother's real estate company, built it up to probably 40 agents in a town of 100,000 or so. It's not a big community.
Yeah.
And then, like a lot of real estate agents, became a developer and a builder and built, apartments, then the commercial real estate, then malls, then hotels, and grew that. And when I was 10 years old, I think he had 3 airplanes, house in the mountains, house in California. He at everything. When I was 11 years old, he had cancer, and everything was turning upside down financially. The 80s market, it was just that period of time, 10 to 16, and watching him lose everything, paying back all of his investors, and he took the fall and lost everything and had to restart his entire life and his career. It gave me a tremendous amount of empathy for people and what they're going through, and understanding everything we do. It's all about people. It's a human business. It's caring for people, and regardless of where they are now, you don't know where they've been. You don't know where they're going. And so it's given me a lot of patience and a lot of perspective, and I truly have a high degree of empathy for those that are jumping out, starting their business, and putting their name and their neck on the line, and the last to get paid. And so as a young lawyer, I left the big firm platform. I was with a large Texas firm that is a wonderful firm, Jackson Walker, 300 plus attorneys when I was there. And I left there 20 years ago and started FBFK. Call it a character trait or character flaw. I wanted to do something a little bit different. Life isn't just, it's nice to have enough resources financially to do things and have freedom, but it's not just about that. It's what are you doing to garner that freedom? And that was a big deal to me, and I wanted to be a little more entrepreneurial. So I jumped out, joined up with one of my former partners and started FBFK, and it was 2 of us, and I used to say, wouldn't it be neat if someday we had 20 lawyers, wouldn't it be neat? That's kind of always my thing. Wouldn't it be neat, or wouldn't it be fun if we're doing this? And, I was able to build my clientele, my book of business, my relationships, just because I naturally do have a high degree of empathy for people who are starting businesses and building businesses, and it's fun.
Yeah.
And I'm a transactional lawyer, so I'm involved when they're buying or selling. And if they're buying, someone's doing something to invest, and their excitement and enthusiasm to grow something and create opportunity for their families and their friends and their community. And then when they're selling, it's a life-changing event for their family. And I get to be involved in a part of that and celebrate it with them. And it's hard for me, from my perspective. Nothing can replace that joy. It really is fun.
There's so much there, and so thank you for being willing to share. One of the things I when we had lunch a few months ago, I think I heard you say this, and you said it again. We're in the human business. It's really a great phrase. Talk some more on that. Is that a term you all use? It's a term I use just because everything's about people. For me, I look at building this, and the thing that's most rewarding for me in my business is I'll sit and I'll think about, and it's shocking to me. I think about, I've got 85, 90 families that are now earning a very nice living because of this business that I was able to be, start and lead, and I think about the other 50 families that we're talking to, are really reflecting probably more like 70, 80 families that we're in current discussions with, groups joining FBFK in Texas and in California. And it's exciting to me. It's exciting to create those opportunities. And then again, serving the clients, it's about the people. It's about serving. We all know this, and we have clients. How many uber wealthy people do we know that are miserable? Because it's not really, having the resources gives you freedom, but if you don't have relationship, if you don't have that passion for people, it's kind of empty. That freedom is prison if you don't have any friends or relationships. So I'm going to ask one more, and then I'm going to hush for a second because I know you got a bunch too. A lesson from your dad's journey. You talked about how it literally shapes your worldview.
Yeah.
You don't seem to have any fear of growing too quickly. That's different than what your dad's situation was obviously the economy itself. How, as an entrepreneur, how has your dad's experienced or not, how has it impacted you one way or the other? decision how fast to grow.
I'm very
Your own entrepreneurial journey. How's it?
I'm very debt avoidant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not to say we don't utilize debt, but we don't leverage to pay ourselves, for example. We don't leverage really to grow. We structure our deals and our acquisitions and people we're bringing on in such a manner that we're not leveraging our future. We don't, I think we had our board meeting today, and I think our total debt burden right now is about $80,000.
Yeah. So you're aggressive growth, but you will not utilize debt as a vehicle.
We will
to get
some
there.
on a very short term, planned out, methodical basis.
Yeah.
We're pretty conservative in that regard. I'm not getting myself in a tremendous amount of debt to build FBFK.
So let's back up for a minute. How did you're married, children?
Married, 3 kids.
Okay.
Yes.
How'd you meet your wife? When and where?
Well, yeah. So I have an intervening. I'm on my second marriage, so I should be honest with that. Yeah. So my first wife and I were married for 20 years, 3 beautiful kids together. And my second wife, we are newly married. I just got married this past August. And we met out in Southern California. I spent some of my time there because I am building an office there. And I also love the area and love the people and love the place
as well. The summer's a little bit better.
And it's a little bit cooler in July and August in Newport Beach.
July and August, maybe.
Indeed.
You want to start an office there?
Indeed. And I've just met some wonderful people out there who have just been a tremendous help to me, because it's kind of like here in Texas.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's really, quite honestly, the thing that's been the most rewarding is how helpful people have been. Again, we're in the human business and we're in the people business. And if you take care of people, and it's that old pay it forward model, most people are well-meaning and they want to be a help and they want to serve. And that's been the most rewarding part of it is the people out. The people have just been so kind to me. I mean, I've been working that kind of involved in that market and going to different events from time to time for 3 years. And here we have this beautiful presence that's starting there in this office that's growing with wonderful, incredibly talented partners and attorneys. It's really neat.
Yeah,
it's been fun. Yeah.
When you started FBFK, when you started, you said, I wanted to do something a little different. And obviously the legal business is very competitive today. Lots of recruiting practice groups and things, and everybody's trying to build a bigger presence, and particularly in a market like North Texas. When you started, what was the thing that was the different take on the legal business that was important?
You and I didn't talk about this beforehand, that you were teeing me up to make my pitch, but I'm going to, kidding. But
he opened the door,
walking through. How we're different is I knew there was an opportunity and interest. My theory was there's an opportunity in the legal business for something a little more entrepreneurial, a little more business-minded, a different way of thinking, a different mindset. One of the things I discovered as a young lawyer, when I was my second or third year practicing law, is most of these brilliant lawyers that I worked for and worked with, they didn't really love talking to people. They were largely introverted. They're very smart, they're very talented, very gifted, but so many of attorneys practicing in this community, they didn't want to just go talk to someone in just like a normal, healthy conversation. They were very introverted and quiet and reserved. And and I'm very introverted as well, contrary to most people's belief that know me, but I am very introverted. And I just forced myself to go out and learn about people and how can I serve someone. I'd go to an event and I'd say, how can I be a help to you? How can I serve you? The money will follow. The money's secondary. It's the service. How can I serve you? But I wanted to have more flexibility in terms of how much we charged. I never wanted to charge a client or who becomes a friend more than what I think I would be willing to pay for the thing that I'm selling to them. And I wanted to make sure that I was looking out for their best interest. And just one example of that is a client comes in and let's say it's a young, earlier stage company. And when I started practicing, the law firm would say, well, we're going to do these 10 things for you and it's going to cost this. I'll go to a client and say, here are the 10 things you need to do, but you really only need to do this one today. Let's talk in a few months. You need to save your money. Save that money you'd otherwise, that $10,000 you'd pay for me. Let's see if we can get you some sales help and go out and you start generating some revenue. Then that revenue can help fund our legal fees. So that way you're not getting more in debt yourself. It's just, again, that's just a high degree of empathy for the business owner.
Yeah.
So something like more flexibility in that and something that also treated the lawyers very well. I'm very focused in our business, and our team hears me say it all the time. The lawyers in our firm are number one, because if the lawyers are taken care of, then the clients are going to be taken care of. If the lawyers are getting treated, and have the resources they need and understand that their opinion, they have a voice and they're heard and they're valuable as human beings, then the clients are going to be treated the same way. And so many of these law firm platforms, especially now, it's gotten worse. Everything's growing billions and billions of revenue, get on the AmLaw 100. All the AmLaw 100's trying to get in AmLaw 20. All the AmLaw 20's trying to get the AmLaw 10. And everyone in that top 10 is trying to be number one. And all these mergers and acquisitions, and it's chasing the revenue. I respect it. I get it. In that business, though, it gets pretty easy to overlook the human being.
Yeah.
What about the 7-year lawyer who's just grinding there and has 2 little kids at home? Are you making sure he or she is home with their children on the evenings and weekends? Does that even factor into your decision making? Or are you incentivizing them to not do that? And are you encouraging them to not do that? Not with your words so much, but maybe with your behavior. So I wanted a model that was a little less of a sweatshop, you might say, paid the lawyers significantly more money on an hourly basis than they're making at any other firm by them having a very flat structure. And I wanted personally access to resources with which I could better serve my clients. Like as a transactional M&A lawyer, I wanted a wonderful tax attorney. And I might not have enough business to keep a tax attorney busy, but if I've got 5 or 6 other partners doing what I do, between the 5 or 6 of us, we can have access to a wonderful tax attorney. That's really what I wanted. I wanted best access to best of breed resources, and then to share that with another group of people. And that group seems to be growing.
And so now, as you've got a couple of groups that you're talking to.
Yes.
What's the pitch to them?
The pitch to them is come be a part of a growing team where you have access to more resources. If it's a smaller firm, which most of these are smaller firms than ours, anywhere from, say, 5 lawyers all the way up to 25 lawyers, you don't have to manage the administrative burden.
Right.
If you're the senior leader of a practice, and many firms, law firms of that size, don't have a succession plan. So let's say you have the senior partners who are in their 60s. They have a great book of business, but they don't really have a next generation of leadership that could really lead, that have that passion that they had to start something, cause them to go out and jump out. So they haven't trained that up. So now they're looking for a place where they can come and have access to resources. And that's what we're providing. We have a wonderful platform. We have a wonderful leadership team, a wonderful management team, top shelf benefits, resources, billing, systems, all of the things that they would get at all of the top firms. But what I'm telling them is come here and you're still going to have your autonomy. We're not going to tell you, we're not eat what you kill, we're not siloed, we want you integrating and being part of the team. But you're not going to have someone asking where you are at 2:30 in the afternoon. You're not going to have someone saying, why didn't you bill 180 hours this month or 200 hours this month? You're going to have someone say, how are you doing and what do you need? What do you need to be successful? How can we serve you? How can I serve you? And that's really the model. It's just serving more of them. And it's really resonating.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about you from the first time I met you is you have a very business-oriented mindset around
Thank you.
the law firm. And I remember, you probably don't remember this, but we were in your space, and you'd just taken down a bunch of empty space.
Yes.
And you walked me through all the empty space, and you were like, we're gonna build all this out, and we're gonna have, eventually this is all gonna be filled up. And I don't know if you remember that or not. But
Oh my goodness.
it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, I'm guessing. But one of the things we talked about was EOS.
Yes.
You remember that conversation?
Yes.
Did you guys ever implement EOS?
It's so funny. It's on my to-do list, Scott. And I know. And
It was on your to-do list 2 months ago, Kyle.
I know. It
So I hate to be the accountability guy now, but
It's so funny. I have a new EOS implementer in Orange County who's talking to me about the same thing. And it's something that's, yes, it's on my list.
All right. So I won't badger you anymore.
no
on that.
badgering. He clearly needs to try
Keep
it.
badgering. Keep badgering.
We don't endorse bullying, but we are going to see bullying happen
you are one of the reasons that I continue to know that that's cycling in the back of my head, and it's something I think about every 3 to 6 months. They're either meeting with an implementer here, or I was introduced to an implementer out in Orange County, and EOS implementers. You guys have been such a good and successful example of that implementation and I've got some other friends, even in the law business, who have it. It's something will help my leadership team. And quite honestly, that's a big part of what I'm working on right now. Is the management.
Quick endorsement. It's incredibly powerful, and I do think having an implementer is really valuable to just hold you accountable and get the work done.
100%.
All right. So you mentioned a second ago, I think you said 75 or 80 lawyers currently.
60.
60, but
sir.
going to
80
potentially with this next group.
We've got 50 attorneys we're talking to among about 7 different groups currently, between our Houston and Plano and California offices.
So how big is your leadership team?
8 on our leadership team.
And are they all
currently.
lawyers? Or some
No,
of
they're
them
not all
100%?
lawyers. It's a mix.
Okay.
So half of that's 100% kind of non-lawyer
Right.
management personnel, anyone from our operations manager to our CFO to our HR director, so on. And we've got a COO. One of my law partners is acting COO currently. We've got our my lovely bride is our communications director. Mm-hmm. She's a longtime data privacy consultant with a large independent consulting firm that she retired from recently, and she's still got her data privacy practice, but she also has got a lot of background in helping us organize our leadership team and management experience and bringing outside perspective. And she and I have also talked about EOS. So we're, again, I know I need to. I'm like, I got to get this done. It's on
You didn't
my
know
list.
you were going to get beat up today coming in.
I'm frustrated because
You'll get there.
All right. So how do you 60 lawyers, how do you give everyone a voice, right? Because obviously you can't have everybody sitting around the table making decisions together. You'd never get anything done. So how do you create that culture, that environment where everyone has a voice, feels like they have, they can be heard if they have something that's important to them?
Absolutely. It's a great question, and it's still a work in process. I think we're good at it, but I don't think we're great at it. I don't think we're at the level of excellence that I want quite yet. But a couple of ways that we do that is we have weekly team meetings with our litigation team, two broad litigation team, our broad corporate transactional team. Every week they meet for 30 to 45 minutes, and it is a roundtable discussion with every participant, from secretary to paralegal to lawyer, associate, partner. Everyone is in that meeting, and we go around and we ask, what's going on? How are you doing? We also have section leaders for both on litigation and corporate, and so they will get a lot of feedback, and we ask. And I've got some good administrative personnel. You kind of have to have what I call every organization's got to have the office therapist. You guys have one. I know you do. You might even have 2.
Yeah.
I've kind of decided I think it's probably about one office therapist to about 30 or 40 people. Mm-hmm. And that's the person that people feel comfortable going and venting their frustrations to. Mm-hmm. And we have a couple of those. And they have a very good open door, and they know, and I repeat to our team, we have quarterly town halls that we just started in the last quarter where I'm speaking to the entire firm and sharing what's going on. I'm very big on transparency. Mm-hmm. It's a very big deal to me. That doesn't mean I get it right all the time, but I want to be as transparent as possible with our team. So I'll share with them if we're talking to a group of attorneys, and they know, this doesn't mean it's going to happen, but this is what we're looking to do.
Sure.
And I take the risk of, well, that failed. Yeah, that's a risk I take, but I would rather take that risk and make sure our team knows what's going on and that we have absolute transparency so they feel comfortable and know what's going on. Mm-hmm. So,
do you feel like you've ever, because you've used that word a few times as well when I've been with you, do you have a negative example of transparency?
A negative example, you mean, of being transparent and it didn't work out, or a negative example of someone who wasn't transparent? And
yeah, say you were transparent or the firm was transparent and maybe the outcome was less than optimal. What are the risks of transparency?
The risk of transparency is if you do something, if you say we're investigating, doing due diligence on opening an office in Florida, and you start talking about that, and then it doesn't happen. The group that you were talking to plant a flag with that you were going to acquire doesn't happen. Then that's a failure, and it's kind of like, oh, what happened? Something's wrong. Something's negative. Why didn't this work out? So I'm very conscientious of that. So when I mention this, I always tell people, and my team trusts me at this point. You've heard me, and they hear me say it every time. I'm sharing this with you, and it may not happen. It's very early on, may not be a good fit, but this is something we're looking at possibly doing. I just have to be very conscious. But I would rather take that risk of failure than they not tell them at all, and then they're in the blind. And then we make a decision, and people get scared and they panic. Well, what are we doing? I've had attorneys in our firm think, well, is Kyle building this to merge it with another firm? to grow it and to be part of another firm and get acquired. And I get that. That's what a lot of people in my position look to do. And I have been approached and am still approached on a very regular basis.
Sure.
And it's an honor, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities. But I want to build something that's going to be here 100 years from now. I think about the firms like a Jackson Walker or formerly Thompson Knight, now Holland and Knight. Those were Thompson Knight was the oldest firm in Texas until they merged into Holland and Knight. Jackson Walker might be the oldest firm in Texas now. And that's really cool to me. Imagine Jackson and Walker in the 1800s starting that firm, and that's still around today, right?
It does sound like a pretty good movie title, good Western title.
Right? I know, it does.
So a couple things on transparency. Is there a philosophy underneath the why behind transparency?
So the why is real simple for me, and it's funny. My partner and Paul Braswell and our firm's COO, and Paul's been with me. He's my second longest partner after Michael Wallencheck that's been with FBFK. He's the B in FBFK. Paul and I used to talk when we were young lawyers about compensation, for example. We had no idea what we were going to make. And when you're talking about money, as you guys know better than I do, every human has a different relationship with money. Mm-hmm. And some of those relationships are very strained. There's a lot of fear around money. It's a very emotional topic and a very emotional subject that people don't really like to talk about. And like Paul, a prime example, as he commented one year, he said, well, last year I built 160 hours and I made X. This year I built 140 hours and I made X. I have no idea what this firm chooses, how they choose to compensate me. I have no idea if I bill another 50 hours next year, will I get paid more? I don't know. He said, I know this. I don't know what my incentives are. And to me, it's kind of contrary to human psychology, human nature is create an opportunity, create that carrot. You can work this hard and this is what you'll make. You can work this hard and this is what you make. There's no pressure, but you have those options. Mm-hmm. People want freedom. Ultimately, that's all money really buys us is freedom. Mm-hmm. Resources get us the freedom to be, live, do, drive, go, vacation, where we want to go. And that's really what it's about is that freedom. And you can give people that freedom even before they acquire abundance, many resources, by saying, here's your opportunity. If you want to make this, you can do that and be happy, and we'll be happy and content. And you can, but these are the hours you can work. And if you want to be the person that bills 2,500 hours a year, you're going to make a lot of money. You're welcome to do that. That's your choice. Mm-hmm. But we're not pushing you. We're not even encouraging it, but you can. So transparency and compensation.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about the transparency conversation, particularly with a lawyer, is that you're really not trained to be transparent, because because the boogeyman's always around the corner, right? And so you're very careful with words and you're very careful with what you communicate. And I have a young second-year law student as a daughter, so I'm getting a little bit of this from her. But just in working with lawyers over the years, very careful with what they say and what they commit to, and the language used and the words chosen. So I appreciate the fact that transparency is a big part of your culture as a law firm, because it sort of is in conflict.
Well, it's a tough balance because the practice of law, you have attorney-client privilege and confidentiality, and you have to be careful with those things. But when you're doing business with lawyers, they're human beings too, and they want to know, there's just some basic fundamentals as it relates to how we run our business that people want to know where things are headed, and they want to feel like they have a voice and they want to feel heard. Another thing that we do to have transparency, we have young attorneys, what I call kind of the next generation that are of FBFK leadership. They attend our board meetings. They attend our compensation committee meetings. They are on our compensation committee. They're involved in seeing what people are making. That's a risk. Some people don't like that risk. Well, I don't want so-and-so. I don't want this fifth-year associate knowing what I make. Well, that's a risk. But
let me press right there.
Yeah.
So what I extrapolate from that is everyone in the firm knows what everyone's making.
Not everyone, but generally people can know. But no, we don't. It's not. You have to. There are some laws around that.
Okay.
So we have to be somewhat limited. But we do have, again, what I consider, or we call, the next generation of leadership. They will serve on those committees, and so they do know. They do know. And they're subject to confidentiality agreements.
Yeah, so essentially up and down, you have selected people, access type people But they have access to.
Some of the younger people, the attorneys, do know what some of the older lawyers make. All the older lawyers make. That is a risk. But
yeah. It's a risk or a reward. I mean, right? I mean, it's either. Right. I think you're arguing that there is way more to be gained than there is the hide and seek.
If you don't show these and train these young lawyers how to run a business and what the business of law is actually like, because I'm a business owner. I just happen to be in the business of law.
Right.
And if you're not training the next generation, then what do you have as a succession plan? Are you really building a legacy business? Are you really building something that's going to be here in 100 years?
Yeah.
You've got to train up that next generation, and so you have to have transparency with them.
I got to be honest with you. I don't know if that's. I've had a lot of lawyer friends over the years as well, but the business of law, I'm not sure I've heard many lawyers speak to that angle of it. So
their law firms do.
Yeah, I think
those running their law firms do.
Yes.
The biggest ones. Yeah,
I think most.
Big ones.
Most lawyers are in the practice of law versus running the business of law. And it's a different skill set.
Yeah,
it's a different skill set.
It takes an entrepreneurial mindset for that to work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's operations, it's people management, it's all those things.
It's a lot of psychology.
It is. What?
I'm ready to switch gears.
Go.
So let's talk about the transaction business.
Yeah.
And just a lot of folks that listen to the podcast are business owners and entrepreneurs, and some have exited, some will exit in the future, and so. One of the great things about having you today is that you've had lots of reps, lots of transactions over time. What are some things that you've seen done really well, and what are some disaster scenarios that our listeners need to avoid?
Oh my goodness. Well, there's an old rule of thumb, and this isn't novel to me or FBFK, although I've never heard a lot of lawyers say it. I will tell a client, if you're going to do it when they're about to commence a transaction, if you don't trust, we could draft up, you could have the most expensive transactional lawyer in the world, charge you $5,000 to $10,000 an hour to draft up the best purchase agreement you could possibly imagine, Loctite, solid, everything behind it. But if that person on the other side of the deal isn't trustworthy enough to do a deal on a handshake that they can't honor their word, the piece of paper doesn't matter. The document doesn't matter because you're going to fight with them, and the deal's a lot more expensive than you think it is. Most business owners don't have endless and copious amounts of money that they enjoy spending on litigation. So my job, our job is to help them structure a transaction that's going to be cost effective, very efficient from beginning to end and through the ending. Meaning, I don't want a client 2 years after closing getting a demand letter from the buyer, let's say if they're the seller, or if they're the seller and they find out something wrong. You've got to do deals with trustworthy people. You need to do a background check on the other party. Are they involved in a lot of litigation? If you see someone's going to buy or sell your business and you see they've been involved in 10 lawsuits in the last 20 years, they know that they're lawyers on speed dial.
Yep.
And they have no problem hiring a lawyer.
Yep.
And that's a quick response.
Yeah,
they have no problem doing that. So know that that's who you're getting in bed with before you, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And I'm happy to charge you $300,000 to document your, $100 million transaction or whatever and get all this done for you. But if the person you're about to enter this deal with is a serial litigant, you could be buying something very badly.
You're the next serial.
Yes.
So I'm guessing also that in the process of a transaction and getting everything papered up, you're interacting with the other side's lawyers, you're interacting with the buyer or seller, and whichever the case may be. Are there clear things that you're like, oh, this is problematic? The way this person is approaching this particular issue.
Are there red flags?
Or this behavior, or this, maybe there's you haven't gotten to that point of knowing whether you can trust the other side or not, but you're seeing things in the course of a transaction that you're like, these are red flags.
Oh,
these are problematic. The things that they're pushing on here tell me their motive is they got the wrong motives or whatever.
There are definite red flags. First one, every lawyer seasoned M&A lawyer will ask is, who's the lawyer on the other side? Does your lawyer, and if you go on the internet and you see the lawyer on the other side also says anything about doing litigation, red flag. If they say they do something other than M&A work, red flag. You want to hire, and I tell clients all the time, whether you use FBFK or any other firm, you want to use someone who does this all the time, and it's pretty much kind of all they do. Because that, you're someone who's not going to fight over issues, not going to argue about issues, because it's not just, most people aren't malicious.
Yep.
It's not malfeasance. It's often misfeasance. If you're dealing with an entrepreneur who grew a business, or let's say they bought a business for $5 million, then it grew it to a $50 million business, and they're looking to sell it. They're not, most of these business owners, they're not, sophisticated consumers of legal services. It's not something they do all the time. They're not calling a lawyer all the time. So they don't know who they should use. So they need a lot of education, and the wrong lawyer can really kill a deal, can make the deal more expensive, can encourage a client to get into litigation when it's not in their best interest. So that's the first big red flag we look for. Another big red flag and I would bore you to go through these terms, but when you see the document of the terms of what they're looking to sell and what that looks like, that's another red flag. Are there things the other party doing? Are they willing to share the risk with you? So that's what every young lawyer learns when they're getting in the contract law, which is what transactional law is. It's contract law. It's all about sharing of risk, allocation of risk. Who's taking what's risk and what's reasonable? A buyer's risking giving a seller a bunch of money, and that money is spendable day one. There's nothing, it's money. It's either spendable or it's not. It's real USD or it's not. And that seller is selling something that's, if it were a car, you could have it inspected to tell if it runs or not. But a business isn't really a car. You can do a lot of inspections. You can get a good accounting firm to do a quality of earnings study. You could get an audit done. A lot of things you can do to do due diligence on the business. But that doesn't necessarily tell you if the car runs well. It could be bootstrapped and a lot of other issues and a lot of things. There are bad actors out there. So anyway, yes, there are a lot of red flags.
And are there times when you're working with a client and you guys are into the transaction and you're like,
oh, 100%.
This is not.
We don't like to kill deals, but we'll stop them down and tell the client, because oftentimes we run pretty efficient on our deal fees. So we really kind of consider ourselves to be in the foxhole with the client, so to speak, on the deal. We're kind of in it with them because most deal lawyers don't get paid until closing.
Right.
So you're kind of in it with the client. So you want to make sure the deal's moving along efficiently, and we also make commitments to clients on what our fees are going to be.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner, hiring a lawyer can be a little bit like writing a blank check. And I ask myself all the time, would I want to be treated that way?
Yeah.
If I were doing this transaction and I were hiring me, would I want to pay that for it? And so that's a constant mantra for us. Is this fair and reasonable to this client relative to this deal? Should a $30 million transaction require $1 million in lawyer fees to close? No.
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
I think one of the things that you could be incredibly helpful for, if you're willing to go there, if I own a company and I'm looking to inquire about selling it and I need to find an attorney, what are the 3 questions I should ask each? And then one of your things you should say, you should interview 3 firms, whatever. As a business owner, what should they be asking an attorney to consider using them for representation?
First thing that business owner should do is go on their website and see what their biography says they do.
Okay.
Again, to my point earlier, does the lawyer do divorces, buy and sell companies, and do evictions?
Yep.
That's not the lawyer for your deal.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. That's the first thing. Before you even talk to them, go on their website. Then once you talk to them, if they do transactions and you can see it's clear that this is what they do, what you're hiring to do is all they do, and it's clear and they articulate well, you can read their bio. It's nothing. There's no magic to it. It's just read it. What does it look like they write well? That's key. And they present themselves well. Then when you talk to them, you ask them how many deals do you do on? Are you a buy side? Are you sell side? How many transactions have you closed in the last 12 months? Who is your transactional team? Who else is helping you do this deal? Who is going to lead the transaction? Are you leading it or someone else? If someone else, who's leading it? Who do they have helping them? Do you have tax help? Are you accustomed to working with my accounting team? So, because you need to make sure your lawyer, your transactional lawyer, also talks to your tax accountant because there are working capital provisions. And the lawyers and the accountants don't often communicate. It's pretty common where even big firms won't talk to the accountant. So the lawyer's drafting let's say a working capital provision that the accountant thinks should read one way and the lawyer's drafting it a different way. And so the accountant's factoring in and accounting for it one way that doesn't reflect what's written in the document, what's agreed to by the parties. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there are a lot of questions. And again, the key is, and check references. Ask an attorney, can you give me two or three people that you've done a deal for in the last 24 months that I could talk to that might say how you operate and how you do things? And can you give me a rough idea of what this will cost? Because every lawyer who does a lot of deals, they know what a deal's going to cost. Mm-hmm. They're like, well,
that's your job to know.
You should know. And so you can tell a client, so this will be less than $200,000, or this will be less than $150 if we do it. And here are the 2 or 3 or 4 lawyers that'll be involved, and here's how they'll be involved. Ask for that education and talk to 3 lawyers. Mm-hmm. And something I tell clients all the time. And even companies that don't even become our client. I'm so passionate about business owners, whether they use FBFK or not. I just want to help them in the business community. Mm-hmm. And for me, the value is I'll tell them, show me your term sheet or your letter of intent, and I'll tell you roughly what it should cost, and I'll tell you what's missing, and you can go take that to your lawyer. Just keep them honest. At least I'm not going to steer. This is really what it should cost in this range. And you tell me if it's a big firm, I'll tell you what the big firm would charge for that, what it should be, and that's fair and reasonable if you need to use a big firm. If it's a small firm, I'll tell you what it should be as well. Mm-hmm. So,
at what point, or is there a line of demarcation where, you're in the wealth management space, and so you should hire a transaction attorney who does wealth management deals, or, you're in the widget manufacturer, so you need to hire an attorney that's really
wealth management's a good one because it's regulated.
Yeah,
there are different laws around wealth management advisory. You have different acts involved, federal and state law acts. You would want to use a lawyer that's familiar with those rules, and that understands not just the regulations, but what I call the rules of the road, the practical application. Yeah. How the regulator's really going to look at this. Yeah, the rule says this, but how do they really go enforce this? Mm-hmm. Do they stretch it? Do they expand the meaning of the regulation, or do they? Yeah, it says that, but they don't look at it that way. Yeah. So having someone who does a lot in an industry that's highly regulated, then you'd want to use someone who's got that expertise.
Gotcha.
Typically, yeah.
And then otherwise, more generalist approach.
Otherwise, more generalist. Yeah, if it's not a highly regulated industry, federally or otherwise, then a good transaction. Most transactional lawyers. It's a question we get all the time. Are you guys? There's one specific industry that you work in, and we say we're industry agnostic because we are. We work across a bunch of industries. We're not really specialists.
Right.
Like I would tell you, could we help you do your acquisition of a advisory firm or a group that you want to acquire? Absolutely, we could. Am I the best fit? Probably not.
Yeah.
Because that's not something we do a lot of. I have experts in that area that can work in that area, but I don't do those day in and day out. And I know there are deal teams that do that day in and day out.
You sat across so many, let's stay on the business owner side. I think that's more of our audience than it is necessarily maybe investors who might be looking to buy. But Kyle, what are those pro tips for them? You sit down with us and I say, I'm thinking about selling the business. What are you going to coach them up on to prepare themselves for the most successful and smooth process?
The best thing a business owner can do for themselves, and I get it, there's a certain threshold below which the cost, it's not cost effective to do it. But above a certain threshold, say at possibly maybe a $10 million and up transaction value, make the investment in your deal by getting what's called a sell-side quality of earnings study. Mm-hmm. Know your numbers. Don't just assume.
What's the price range for that?
Oh goodness, depends on how active the market is, but it could be there's some firms that'll do a small Q of E study for $20,000, and some will cost $80,000.
Okay, so business owner, there you have one expert giving you a price range.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in their groups you can find, but that's one of the best things you can do, and it's money well spent. The other, I'm also fond, if someone's looking to going to market and selling, I'm also fond of telling them, go get a good advisor. Go talk to a couple of, 3 investment bankers. Even if you don't engage any, you're going to learn a lot. They're going to educate you on your industry. They're going to educate you on what the market looks like. There are a lot of general factors in the market. Even if an investment banker doesn't understand your particular industry, they do understand the deal industry, and they understand, for example, if banks aren't lending in that space. Oil and gas is the best one to talk about in Texas. There are some banks that will not touch oil and gas. There's some banks that love oil and gas. And there's some banks that used to love oil and gas. And there's some banks that someday here in the near future might love oil and gas again. And you got to know who those lenders are to help you finance your transaction, because that's the cost of capital is a big driver of whether a deal is going to be efficient to get done or not. The timing could be off. So you may hold up as a business owner and say, hey, Fed might drop rates 1/4 point here in the next 60 days. Let's hold off and see, and maybe let's punt this 90 days and see what happens. Because that cost of capital, if you're borrowing enough money, if you're doing a $50 million transaction and you're financing the deal with $30 million in debt, you want to know what rates are meaningful.
That's right. That's right.
It's a real cost of the capital.
That's right.
So just a few things. I'm a big fan of getting a quality of earnings study, and I'm also a big fan of talking to investment bankers. If you're a seller, or quite honestly, even if you're a buyer as well. If you're looking out to grow your business strategically, same thing.
Anything else internally you would tell them to be working on, or externally?
Consider who your key people are. Who's got to go with the business, and how much do you trust that they will stay? Who's key to your business? Who could cost you a lot of money if they left? Who's painful? Before you go down that road, let's get some agreements with them and have a meeting of the minds with those people. You don't have to tell them you're selling.
Right.
You just say, hey, I want to make sure you're here for the long run. I want to know what you're doing. I want to incentivize you to be here. Yeah. I love business owners who love their people and want to cut them in on the deal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of business owners say, well, I'm going to set aside 10% or 15% of the proceeds, and I'm going to cut these 3 key people in. I love doing that. And I have business owners that are great about it. Buyers, if you're a seller, buyers absolutely love owners that are willing to do that, because that tells them they are emotionally invested in making sure the deal goes well. And a buyer loves that.
Yeah.
And why does a buyer love that?
Because they don't want to buy something that's going to be a dog. And they don't want to buy something that's gonna fall apart on them. Again, always what I educate clients on, keep in mind, your buyer is giving you something you don't have to go inspect and make sure is worth what they're saying it's worth. It's money. It is what it is. You as a seller, you're selling something that they don't know what it is. They're having to take your word for it. Depending on what it is, what kind of business you run.
Well, and if you're taking care of your people pre-transaction, it's signaling that you're taking care of your people. You've got a good culture, and that's an important thing, and that's going to be a more stable business on the post-transaction side.
Yep.
As you all are growing, you're growing quickly, obviously smartly, but what are some? Well, at least not going in big debt. We established not going in big debt to go do it.
That's right. That's right.
That's pretty smart. But what are the biggest challenges what keeps you up at night right now?
Oh my goodness. Well, as soon as I say this, then Scott's going to give me the stink eye, but it's the management team, infrastructure, which is where EOS comes in. Yeah. Don't roll your eyes.
I won't say it.
Say it. It really is the infrastructure, because I take very seriously my desire to serve these lawyers on our team with excellence. That everything, I want to serve them well. Again, and it's funny, some of my older partners are like, why are the lawyers first? The clients should be first. I'm like, think about it. If the lawyers are treated well, if we treat as a management and leadership team, treat the lawyers well, then
there's
the clients are going to be
effect.
treated. Yeah, the clients are going to be treated well.
Yeah.
And moreover, if we're treating the team that serves the lawyers well, then they're going to take care of the lawyers, and the lawyers are going to have all they need, and they're going to go out and do their best job for the client and take care of the client. If you've got a lawyer that you're just beating down and dogging, how do you think they're going to pick up the phone and communicate with the client? How long do you think it's going to take to them to respond to that client's email or phone call? They're beat down and tired. They're going to get around to it when they get around to it, and you can threaten and cajole, but that only, negative reinforcement only gets so far. Gets you so far.
Yeah.
So, that's my biggest stressor is the infrastructure, the management team, the leadership team, and trying to lead that with excellence and building that out, because we've grown very rapidly. And quite honestly, we've got a lot of rapid growth ahead of us and a lot of opportunity. I'm very excited about it, but I want to be a good steward of it.
Yeah.
I want to do a good job.
You've been transparent, your word, and vulnerable.
Yes.
Why is that? That's your biggest challenge right now?
Yes.
And so what blocks you? Obviously, so many people who listen to this, they're right in your shoes. That's why you said it so well. You're in the business of law.
Yes.
So they're in the business of manufacturing or retail or hospitality. What's holding you back from executing? Why is that?
There's when you're a small business owner and you evolve and grow to a middle market business and then a large business, you're evolving with human beings. It's a people business, and your team. If culture is important to you, you love your team, and you hate to see someone getting hurt. And certain members of your team might have dreams and visions that outpace their capabilities, and that's hard. That's really hard. You have to speak straight and have very direct and what can be hurtful conversations, And so it's a constant evolution of trying to. There's some people that want to rise up and want to grow and learn and educate themselves and get skills and go get certifications and training and invest in themselves. And some people that don't want to do that, and you can't force them.
That's right.
And I'm still learning the hard way. Some people aren't meant to do things that I would love to see them do. Doesn't matter how passionate I am about someone, and I see their potential. But if they don't feel it, they're not seeing it, and they're not willing to invest in themselves, then you've got to make sure they're in the right. It's the old saying, it's having the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus. But second to that, it's having the right people in the right seats on that bus. And that's
EOS
hard.
talks about
I think
that,
they
doesn't it?
EOS calls that RPRS.
Dude, you're going to leave this and say, I hate Scott and Doug. And I am so regretful that I showed up in an EOS commercial.
I know.
If you work with EOS, you just say thank you to Scott and Doug, because we were both thinking. It's so, you know what? And we don't often do this, Kyle, because the way the podcasts kind of get released. But we had a conversation today with Ricky Dixon. He was the CEO of Bluebell Creameries.
Oh, wow.
But it was such a good conversation around this, that having hard conversations with really good people that naturally probably hit some promotion, but then it's not a right fit. And I had an old friend call them life-giving conversations. And I used to tease him that he was trying to spin something bad into something good, but it really is, because most people are self-aware. I was a really good X, but they promoted me to Y, and I'm just not good at it.
The Peter principle, is that what they call that? Something like
Yeah.
that?
And so now the people that are reporting to this person, they're frustrated, and they've always liked John or Sue, and now they're frustrated. And then John and Sue aren't happy because they know that they're not making it happen for the people reporting. So they really are life-giving conversations. They're difficult, but they're absolutely critical.
And I'm still growing as a leader and learning.
There's a saying, I think it's, something along the lines of being truthful is kind.
Yes.
And it's a hard thing, but the reality is most people are aware that there's some kind of tension there.
Yes.
And it's just better to open it up and talk about it. And you've already talked about transparency so much. It's just an extension of that. I'll just share with you one story, which I think might be helpful. I just rolled off of a big nonprofit role, and I've watched this nonprofit over the last 5-6 years go through this transformation with people. And the leader of this, the executive director of this organization, I told her a couple of years ago, I said, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get all the right people in the right seat. And some people are not going to buy into the future vision of where this thing is going, and they'll kind of self-eject along the way. And some people just won't be able to do what's going to be required. And I said, you're going to spend a couple of years on the people side of this. But once you get that fixed, or the work, and it's hard work. Once you've done that work, then you can focus on like the exciting stuff, right? The stuff that's so energizing, and then everybody will be aligned around that new common vision. And I think, and now so fast forward, we've seen that happen. We've seen people leave. We've seen people that needed to be asked to leave. We've seen new people come in. Everybody's aligned around this sort of new vision and new approach, and it's amazing to watch the lift of everything just feels lighter.
It's that
everything's moving.
if you're willing to pay that price and get the right people on the bus and the right seats.
But you got to go do that hard work, and we're experiencing the same thing. We're going through some pretty rapid growth here too, and I think we all as leaders underestimate the how difficult change is.
Yep.
You know,
Yes.
I mean, for some, change is exhilarating.
Yeah.
For some, it's terrifying.
Absolutely terrifying.
Right?
Absolutely.
And you have everybody along the spectrum in between. And so I think change is just a lot harder than someone who's exhilarated by it thinks. And so, you just got to slow down and bring people along and have those tough conversations.
If only there were some good management team systems that existed.
Right.
Anyone, you guys know of.
No, we don't. We don't know.
I will say
Touche.
a lot of people will go down the path of self-implementing EOS.
No, I would not be one of those.
And I would say one of the most valuable things that an implementer brings to the table is this objective view to be able to say, hey, that person that you've been talking about 3 quarters in a row, when you've come in here now for 9 months, don't come back in here next quarter without solving that issue, right? And because again, we're all compassionate and we care about people, and
The objectivity is critical, especially the first 2-3 years.
Yeah.
How I'm getting my head around making these hard decisions is I have to remind myself there are 85 families dependent upon us doing things well, and my catering or coddling, as my wife might put it, someone who's in the wrong position doesn't help those other 84 or 5 families.
Yeah.
That's be mindful of serving them well, and that's true. But it is a people business, and I'm a highly empathetic person, and I'm learning. I'm growing.
I use this silly little analogy, the golden goose.
Yes.
And the company FBFK is the golden goose, right?
Yes.
And if the golden goose is healthy, she's going to lay a lot of golden eggs. Yep. And golden eggs are going to be in the form of compensation and upward mobility and good bonuses and work-life balance and culture and transparency and all the things that are important to FBFK.
Yes.
But if the golden goose is not healthy, she will not lay golden eggs, and that affects everybody, right? And so what do we need to do as an organization to make sure we keep FBFK or the golden goose healthy so that she will continue to lay golden eggs that benefit everybody?
I like it. Thank you for sharing.
It's a silly little thing, but it's just
it's a good way to think about it. Good perspective.
Absolutely. It's phenomenal. Kyle, absolutely love what you're about, who you are. You are in the human business, as we are all in the human business.
Yes, sir.
We're grateful for you being on Decision Points. Thanks for making time.
Thank you very
Kyle.
much. I
Good to
appreciate
see
the
you again.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.